You know, some conflicts pit nation against nation, right? Clean lines on a map. But the invasion of Corrientes in 1865, well, that was something else entirely. It wasn't just a simple act of war. It was like striking a match in a powder keg, revealing a country that was already at war with itself. So, picture this. It's Good Friday, a day that's supposed to be all about peace, reflection. But out on the Paraná River, that quiet was about to be absolutely shattered. This attack, it was timed for maximum shock and surprise. And boy, did it work. Imagine being a resident of Corrientes, just going about your day, and you see this on the horizon. For them, this wasn't just some distant event. This was the start of an occupation that would totally change the course of the war and, more importantly, expose these massive cracks hidden deep within their own nation. All right, so let's get into the surprise invasion. The Paraguayans didn't just show up out of the blue. Oh no, they had a plan. This was a really swift, calculated move. And their goal wasn't just to grab land. They were trying to win over the locals who they thought would be on their side. So General Robles and his 3,000 soldiers land, and they face zero resistance. And the first thing he does, he sends a message to the city. And it's a clever one. He says, hey, we're not here to conquer you. We're here to liberate you from the despotism of Buenos Aires. And this wasn't just a military thing, It was a full-on political takeover, all planned out. They immediately set up a puppet government with some locals who were sympathetic. But let's be real, the real power was with a guy named José Barajas, who was getting his orders straight from the Paraguayan president. They grabbed all the government archives and maps, started using Paraguayan money, and at first they were actually pretty mild with the citizens. It was all part of the plan to win them over. But here's the thing, that alliance they were hoping for, it never really happened, because this invasion didn't unite Argentina against a common enemy like you'd expect. Nope. Instead, it just ripped the country's political seams wide open for everyone to see. So down in the capital, Buenos Aires, you get this famous rallying cry from President Mitre. I mean, talk about confidence. His words just captured this huge wave of patriotic anger. It was bold, it was confident, and, as we'll see, it was completely and totally optimistic. It promised a victory that would be quick and decisive. But that patriotic fire, it definitely didn't burn everywhere. Not even close. You've got these young guys in Buenos Aires and Rosario rushing to sign up. But then you look over at the powerful province of Entre Rios, and it's the complete opposite story. They were totally against the war. In fact, a lot of them saw Paraguay as a natural ally against the central government in Buenos Aires. So fight them? No way. And the resistance to fighting was just staggering. Take General Urquiza, a really powerful local leader. He manages to gather 8,000 men. But then the soldiers figure out they're supposed to fight against Paraguay, not with them. And what happens? The army just dissolves. Mass desertion. So Urquiza tries again. He raises another 6,000 men. And guess what? The exact same thing happens. They desert. At this point, Urquiza basically throws in the towel and ends up getting rich by selling horses and cattle to the Allied forces instead. You can't make this stuff up. Okay, so this brings us to what is maybe the most bizarre and contradictory part of this whole story. The day the Allies came to liberate Corrientes, and I'm using air quotes for liberate for a reason, this was a so-called victory that would turn into a total national embarrassment. How many soldiers do you think it took? Just 725. That's it. This tiny force of Allied soldiers, led by a General Palmero, launched this incredibly bold assault to take back the city, and they did it on May 25th, Argentina's National Day. Very symbolic. The battle itself was fast and it was brutal. The Allied fleet shows up around 10 a.m. and just starts bombarding the Paraguayan positions. In the afternoon, the troops land and it turns into this vicious street-to-street fight. By evening, they've done it. The outnumbered Paraguayans are defeated and flee. The Allies are victorious. But then, something really weird happens. The very next morning, General Palmero orders all his troops to abandon the city they just fought in blood for. Just get back on the ships. So you gotta ask, right? Was this a victory worth celebrating? Well, if you asked the actual citizens of Corrientes that night, the answer would have been a hard no. There was this officer there, Juan Bautista Charlone, and he wrote about how weird the reaction was from the so-called liberated people. Think about that. There was no joy, no one cheering in the streets, just this tense, watchful silence. They knew something was very, very wrong. And why were they silent? Well, the answer, ironically, comes from the enemy general. Because that's what happened. During the night of their supposed liberation, the Allied soldiers went on an absolute rampage. They looted and trashed over 70 local homes and businesses. It was so bad that even the Paraguayan commander expressed shock that Argentine soldiers would do that to their own people. So that whole victory at Corrientes, it was a political nightmare. But on the military front, the Paraguayan invasion was about to completely fall apart, thanks to two huge decisive defeats. The first major blow happened on the water. The Battle of Riachuelo was this massive naval clash. And to put it simply, the Brazilian fleet just crushed the Paraguayan navy. This gave the Allies total control of the Paraná River, which was basically the highway for the war. And with that one battle, the main Paraguayan army was suddenly cut off from all its supplies, its reinforcements, any chance of retreat. Their fate was pretty much sealed. And losing control of the river was absolutely devastating for Paraguay's whole two-pronged invasion plan. You had the main column, led by General Robles, heading down the Paraná River. Well, after Riachuelo, they were completely isolated, stranded. Then you had the second column over on the Uruguay River. They were about to be annihilated. The second knockout blow came on land. First, at the Battle of Yatay, an Allied force that was about 4 times bigger just obliterated a Paraguayan division. We're talking 3,000 Paraguayans against almost 12,000 allies. It was a slaughter. Then, a month later, the rest of that army gets surrounded at a town called Uruguayana. They're outnumbered almost 17,000 to 5,500. They were forced to surrender without even fighting. Just like that, the entire Eastern invasion force was gone. So the invasion of Argentina is collapsing. The war is now going to move into Paraguay itself. But back in Argentina, the fighting might have been moving on, but the argument, the battle over what this war even meant, was just getting started. So let's recap the aftermath. By October of '65, the last of the Paraguayan forces are retreating from Corrientes. And yeah, they're looting everything they can on the way out. Their whole invasion has been a complete catastrophe. They've lost their entire invading army, over 37,000 men. Meanwhile, the Allied army has swelled to 50,000 soldiers, and they're ready to invade Paraguay. And to top it all off, Argentina is now officially locked into this war because of the brand new Triple Alliance Treaty. But remember that so-called victory back on May 25th? Yeah, that was still a major sore spot. So when the government tried to award medals for the battle, the Argentine Congress just erupted into this huge, furious debate. It really exposed how raw the nerves were. You had senators like Joaquin Grinel standing up and asking some really tough questions. They didn't see heroism. They saw a poorly planned, costly stunt. They asked, why were our troops sacrificed in a fight of 1 against 5? And why did they retreat so hastily right after winning? They suspected the whole battle wasn't really about military strategy. It was about political posturing for the government back in Buenos Aires. So, in the end, the invasion of Corrientes definitely forced Argentines to fight, but the fiercest battles weren't always against the foreign army. So many of them were fought between fellow countrymen, in army camps that fell apart, and right there on the floor of Congress. It really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? Was this really a war against Paraguay, or was it a war inside Argentina?